Other tamers awakened dragons, wolves, and monsters built for war. Yu Yang received one blood-red mosquito that could evolve without limit. Treasure hunters were already draining a lake to seize a spirit-nurturing crystal. Their killing formation targeted the guardian, while greed erased every warning. The mosquito could devour blood, absorb power, and mutate beyond its original grade. Every dangerous meal opened another path no ordinary beast could reach. Its first real battle turned a mocked contract beast into a lethal surprise. Before long, Yu Yang's weakest summon became the threat every tamer feared. Down at the lakeside, in the thin drifting mist, a mysterious formation disk had already taken shape. Its silver lines traced in fine powder across the ground, and above it, a second set of murderous patterns lay overlaid on the first. The sea-turning formation meant to drain the lake dry, and the lightning strangulation formation meant to slaughter whatever guarded the treasure. Since a place where a heaven-defying treasure is born almost always comes with a guardian beast, their spiritual power nearly spent, yet their eyes still shimmered with a greed they could not hide. Their leader, Brother Jiang, ran one last check across the working, before he turned a stern look on Yu Yang, who had been bowing and scraping at the edge of the group. Yu Yang patted his own chest, swearing on his life it was true, insisting his treasure-seeking compass had never read higher than first grade peak. At the very most, brushing the threshold of the second grade. But the others beside him had long since been blinded by the crystal, and none of them wanted to hear about caution now. One told Brother Jiang to stop dithering, when the man had staked his life on it. Now with all of them together, and the kill formation already laid down. A third pointed out that the strongest thing a low-level realm could hold was a second-grade mid-stage beast, and the last urged them to hurry before somebody else stumbled onto the treasure. Under all that pressing, the sliver of doubt, and Brother Jiang thinned. Even a second-grade early-stage guardian meant nothing, he told himself. 3 of them first-grade late-stage, and a kill formation already primed. He stopped hesitating and called out in a low voice for everyone to prepare to activate the formation. Yu Yang cheered them on, pumping his fists like the world's most loyal follower, telling the big brothers to go and get it. His feet, unnoticed by anyone, had already drifted a dozen meters back, opening an absolutely safe distance. A pack of idiots, blinded by their own greed, he sneered inwardly, slipping the plain bronze compass back into his sleeve. It was a genuine, Earth-grade, low-tier magical treasure. The heavenly mystery dragon-seeking compass, an item so far above this place that even 9th-grade powerhouses in the provincial capital of Dunan City would turn green with envy at the sight of it. He came from the Jin family, a martial clan that had once shaken this whole province, keeping king-level experts at its gates in its glory days, until a cataclysmic feud dragged it down, and every one of its powerhouses died in a single night. A loyal clan uncle had fought to the death to carry him out, and he had fled and fled, burying his own name, until he reached this remote little city of Gang City, all because he was afraid the old enemies would find him. An enemy now a thriving clan in Sumyong province that could crush him with a flick of a finger. He had endured too long, sick to death of skulking in the gutters like a rat. When the compass needle had swung and locked onto it, even Yumyong had been stunned, because by the textbooks, this was a heaven-grade wonder that should only ever be born inside a calamity-level secret realm. Once it was his towering martial talent, joined to his heaven-defying spiritual power gift, would show a potential violent enough to shock the world. Just look at Hyun, he thought bitterly, a vase with mediocre talent who got the city lord's mansion to guard her, only because she lucked into a contract with a clever mosquito. Once he had the crystal, the value he displayed would be 1,000 times hers. So these formation masters all had to die today, because only if every one of them was silenced could he refine the treasure in peace. Curtain of silver light shot into the sky and draped itself over the entire lake, and the water seemed to be gripped by a vast invisible hand, churning into a massive tornado that the formation kept siphoning off and flinging into the distance. Further off, behind a cluster of rocks, the mosquito was enjoying the show. Hyun kept her face perfectly calm, not a ripple in those cold eyes, since to her a working at this level was a child scribbling in the dirt. In her past life, though never a specialist in formations, she could have thrown up a 9th-grade grand formation on a whim. Still, for first-grade masters, raising a working this powerful was already genius among their peers, and the only pity was that their brains were the weak part, since they were being used as pawns and did not even know it. Soon, he told her through the contract, rubbing his four legs together and getting more worked up by the section. Just as the lake bottomed out, a roar packed with fury exploded from the depths, and a huge black shadow shot out of the muddy water. A second-grade mid-stage ink-jade black turtle. And in those murky eyes, a boiling rage locked onto the little bugs on the shore, who had shattered its sweet sleep. The instant Brother Jang felt that aura, the blood drained from his face, and he cursed out loud, blurting that it was second-grade mid-stage and howling every insult he had at Yu Yang. And Yu Yang only put on a face more shocked and innocent than any of theirs, protesting that the compass had read at first-grade peak, so the thing must have hidden its strength. The furious turtle had already opened its maw, and a jet-black column of water, thick as a barrel, came blasting at them like a cannon. And Brother Jang tore his throat raw, screaming for them to activate the kill formation. Lightning flared, blinding countless thick electric snakes lancing out and weaving into an enormous net of thunder that strangled down toward the black water column, the two energies colliding with a deafening roar. And in the end, under the eight masters' reckless output, that thick-heighted turtle was finally worn down and blasted into charcoal. Their sides had paid dearly, though, every one of them drained bone dry and collapsing to the ground with faces white as paper, without even the strength to stand. And yet, those pale faces were lit with the giddy joy of people who had survived a disaster. They laughed that they had won, crowed that the crystal was theirs, and began dragging themselves up to dig for the treasure. They saw him walking toward them step by step. He thanked them for laboring on his behalf, then said he regretted to inform them there would be no wages. Brother Jang and the others sat stunned as the truth crept in. They had been played, used from the start. The old game of the mantis, stalking the cicadas, with the oral waiting behind. Another master, fury in his eyes, but a sneer on his lips, told Yumong not to make him laugh. He was nothing but trash first-grade mid-stage, and the miniature defensive formation woven around him was not something garbage could break. No fear in their eyes, only the contempt you would show a clown. Since his formation masters, none of them came from simple stock, and everyone carried a life-saving trump card. And what, he added softly, if he were not first-grade mid-stage at all? The moment the words left him, a raw tide of blood chi erupted out of him, climbing from first-grade late stage on, up to first-grade peak. That towering aura pressed down on every heart like a mountain. The air freezing, the gravel and grass, clippings on the ground, rattling from the sheer pressure. First-grade peak, Brother Jang whispered, lips trembling, and then, hollow with dread, asked whether the man had been hiding his strength this whole time. Their eyes nearly split as they finally understood that from the moment Yu Yang walked up to them, their fates had been sealed. The formations they were proud of, the battle they had fought with their own lives, every bit of it had been a scene in this man's script. Yumong threw back his head and laughed, savage and unrestrained, crying that finally he no longer had to pretend, every humiliation and resentment of the years pouring out of him at once. But just then, a clear, cold woman's voice cut in from behind the rocks, remarking that the acting had been quite good, and the trump cards quite plentiful, that she truly had underestimated him. The smile froze on Yumyong's face, and he spun around. They saw Hyun stroll out from behind the rocks with her strange mosquito, a hint of surprise on her lovely face, and the masters' heads buzzed, completely thrown. So, and could it be they were sitting at the very bottom of the food chain? It was Han, the school beauty, who had thrown the whole school into an uproar during the campus-wide test 3 days back. Why would she be here? A first-grade latest-stage martial artist contracted to a first-grade early-stage mutated mosquito. So with so little to her name, how did she dare speak to him in that tone and lurk in the shadows playing the oral? Exactly as he had. Did she have hidden trump cards too? Or was she, as the rumors whispered, simply a lunatic with a broken head who had no grasp of what she stood before? And until he understood an opponent, he would never move rashly. But just as he forced himself calm, a thought struck him like lightning and made his very soul shudder. Because to wipe out those masters, he had let his blood chi loose without reservation, breaking clean through to first-grade peak. That was top tier in a small city high school like Gang City. And while it fell short of drawing the Federation's high leaders, it was more than enough to catch the various powers inside the province. If he walked out like this, his identity would be blown wide open. All his years of forbearance for nothing, and he would die. His gaze snapped to the dried-up lake bed. Only by seizing it, pushing his talent up another level, and showing potential enough to shake the entire Federation. Could he earn the highest protection and actually survive? It was no longer merely a chance to change his fate. With the last of his hesitation gone, Yumyang stared hard at Hyun and told her slow and hoarse that she really had picked a bad time to arrive, that things she should not see were best left unseen or else she would die. Haone acted as if she had not caught a word, not even sparing him a second glance, since to her this mantis turned oral, however deep his cards, was just a slightly more energetic ant. The aura of the spirit-nurturing crystal, maddeningly seductive and impossible to hide, sure to draw the realm's other beasts and other examinings once it spread. So she had to get her hands on it fast, and asked in a flat conversational tone whether the mosquito could handle this place, while she went and fetched the item. The words carried plainly to everyone present, the whole shore short-circuiting on that one sentence. She was leaving it to the mosquito. Not a problem, boss, he told her at once. It was just a division of labor. The kind of small chore that took only a mouth and a first-grade peak martial artist against him right now was frankly an easy win. Artist behind her, or the masters heaped on the ground. After a few days side by side, she could sense his aura had also reached the ceiling of first-grade peak, a single step from breaking through. On the shore, Yu Yang and the masters gaped at her back. Every one of them crashed, faces stamped with baffled shock. She really just left, dropping her first-grade, early-stage mosquito on a first-grade peak martial artist, and 8 masters who, drained or not, still had their trump cards. The woman really was a complete lunatic, exactly as the rumor said, and he had simply overthought a madwoman, thinking what a shame it was that a creature with this much intelligence and this unique a form, a variant worthy of the history books, had gone and followed the wrong master. On the ground, the masters rode their own roller coaster. A moment ago, Han's arrival had lit a thin flame of hope since they had taken the school beauty for the true hunter behind the mantis. So surely it was over, that it was a shame supreme intelligence like mine had gotten itself contracted to a lunatic, perhaps simply fate. Then he stopped hesitating, stomped down, blew the ground apart under his feet, and shot at him like a cannonball, a thick coat of earthy yellow light condensing over his fist and tearing a piercing sonic boom from the air. Facing that thunderous strike, he did not dodge at all. He just gave his pair of wings streaming with dark red flame, light a leisurely little flap. Over a dozen flame feather blades, wrapped in pale flame power, sprayed out of his wings like a shotgun blast, ripping toward him at several times the speed of a bullet, and he barely had time to cross his arms and slam every drop of blood she into them before the whole dozen landed at once. A string of dense explosions tore out, scorching lag and violent shock waves swallowing him whole. His body flew back over 10 m, as though a speeding truck had hit him head-on, crashing down and rolling several times before it stopped. Clothes shredded in and charred black, the whole man a smoking wretch. The masters gaped, with eyes bulging half out of their skulls, because that first-grade peak, Yu Yang, had been on-shotted by a mosquito. Their heads whipped around to stare at him, drifting there and lazily fanning his wings, an aura even thicker and more suffocating than the one Yu Yang had released, rolling off his tiny body. 3 days ago at the school test, it had been first-grade early stage, and in 3 days it had climbed all the way to first-grade peak. Yum dragged himself up, spitting out a mouthful of charred-smelling blood, and staring at him like he had seen a ghost, muttering that it was impossible, demanding to know whether he too had been hiding his strength. He had endured for years, waited so long to detonate his limit, and a mosquito had gravely wounded him in a single move. Worse, a terrifying realization landed on him that this mosquito might actually be able to stop him, which meant the crystal might really be snatched clean out of his hands. He roared his unwillingness, bloodshot eyes sliding into full madness, snarling that he did not care what kind of monster the mosquito was. The blood chi in him erupted again, more violent than before, his frame swelling a size larger and strange patterns surfacing across his skin, the clear mark of a secret technique, forced open to stimulate his potential. He called out the thick earth mountain's suppressing punch and charged its mountain-heavy intent, cracking the sandy ground beneath his feet before the fist even arrived. His family owning an extensive library, and himself having leafed through the province's famous manuals. That punch intent, that earthy yellow blood chi light, was the Jin family's thick earth mountain, a pressing punch from years past, and he demanded to know who this man was. Only now did they grasp that his secrets ran far deeper than they had imagined. for a punch of that power could easily kill an ordinary second-grade early-stage beast, and they wondered whether even the mosquito could block it. Yumong's fist, strong enough to shatter a stone monument, whistled past his 6 legs and slammed into empty air, plowing a trench several meters long into the sand. The masters froze him with him. A deathly silence rolling back over the world as everyone stared up at the mosquito, looking down on a lot of them. Slowly, with enormous effort, Yu Yang raised his head to the mosquito that was so close, and yet as far off as the horizon, and his mind went blank. As a first-grade martial artist, he could not step on the air, could not reach him, and out of him, ground between his teeth, came a single curse packed with endless humiliation, having an absolute blast up there. This was the great weakness of martial artists, who before the 5th grade could not manage even a brief hop through the air, and had basically no long-range attacks. Yumyong bellowed, springing skyward like a loaded spring, and hurling that heavy int fist at him again. Useless. He just drifted up another few meters, careless as ever, and he crashed back to Earth and smashed a shallow crater into the ground, thought pounding through him that he simply could not touch it. His mind boiled over, the caution he had guarded for years, evaporating in a single beat. She was only a beast tamer, and without her contract beast at her side, even a first-grade late-age martial artist would never block his desperate strike, and killing her would deal her blood contract beast a heavy blow, even if it did not die. Dropping the initiative back into his hands, he roared like a beast, turned his back on him, and charged madly toward the lake bed, as if the mosquito would let him have his way. This time, the crazed Yumyong did not dodge at all, eating several explosions dead-on, and letting the searing shock waves rip his skin open, still bullying forward under the effect of his potential stimulating technique. Such a hard head, he thought, genuinely a little surprised. But it did not matter, because with a single thought, he opened the molten insect hive. A dark red spatial rift, as if it opened onto some purgatory plane, tore into being out of thin air right in front of him, and outpoured an endless crimson swarm, their bodies packed with unstable, about to detonate, pale flame power. Yumong's charge jerked to a dead stop as he stared in raw horror at the sea of self-detonating insects blotting out the sky. And before he could fall back, the swarm swallowed him whole. In an instant, it was as if 1,000 miniature bombs went off at once. A chained torrent of deafening blasts, flame, and shockwave, shredding a layer off the ground for dozens of meters around. Brains locked solid, unable to string together a sentence. It had summoned an army, they realized. An army of self-detonating insects. But this mosquito had summoned hundreds, thousands, an endless sky swallow and tide. This was no contract beast, and they had no idea what monster they had provoked today. The aftershocks faded, leaving only a huge scorched crater, and Yu Yang lay at its center with not one patch of intact skin left. Limbs twisted. He had lost completely without a shred of suspense, the scheming he took such pride in, and the strength he had buried for years exposed as a ridiculous, overreaching joke, and he began to laugh, broken and hysterical, tears running down. A fist-sized crystal cupped in her hand, transparent through and through, countless stars swirling inside as they were born and died, kind that soothed the mind just by being near. Yet there was no joy on Haydn's face. Her beast-taming bag was built to store living creatures, dead ones too, at a pinch, but not a heavenly treasure like this. And she could not simply carry it bare in her hand the whole way back and pull every monster and examine in the realm down on her head. While she worried, he flew over, with something clutched in his legs, an unremarkable hide pouch. So, he dropped it at her feet and signaled her to use it. She looked at the bag, then at him. A faint, imperceptible gleam of approval crosses her cold eyes. Allowing that as a companion, this guy was barely qualified. With the loop put away, she turned her cold gaze on Yu Yang, lying broken in the pit. She had never held a scrap of pity for someone who wanted her dead. She raised a hand and a sharp blade of palm wind whistled out and ended his life, clean and decisive. Then her eyes drifted to the masters, sprawled a shen on the ground. They had witnessed everything and learned the terrifying strength of the mosquito, so there was no way they would not be silenced. Proud sons of heaven raging inwardly at dying so senselessly in this godforsaken place. Yet just as they closed their eyes to meet death, Hyun's cold voice came again, and the words stunned them. She would give them a chance to live, and whatever valuable items they carried, she said flatly, but with an authority that broke no argument. And as for the crystal's secret, she would absorb it soon and have nothing left to hide. Once outside, Brother Jen and the others snapped their eyes open in astonishment because she was not killing them, but asking for ransom, actually meaning to let them go. Wealth was an outside thing, but a lost life was the end of everything. Brother Jang reacted first, ignoring his wretched state as he yanked a pile of items out of his storage ring, calling her big boss and offering all his savings, a few bottles of second-grade chai recovery pills, and a third-grade defensive talisman, begging her to spare him. Hyun's gaze swept the scattered pills and talismans, and finally settled on a few bottles of blue pills, giving off a rich medicinal fragrance. Meridian-protecting pills and second-grade ones, exactly what she needed most because cultivating the 10,000 Beasts furnace art put a brutal load on the meridians. And with these she could push all the satisfied, she waved a hand to sweep everything into Yu Yang's storage bag, then waved the men off. Brother Jang and the 8 of them scrambled up like prisoners, granted amnesty, and hurried away, exchanging looks heavy with relief and a tangled complexity, killing Yu Yang because he wanted her dead, sparing them because they had never shown hostility and had in essence sense done her a favor by draining the lake, a disposition that did not read like a high schooler at all. One master started to say something with lingering fear, and Brother Jen cut him off low and sharp, ordering that everything today rot in their stomachs. He knew someone like Hane was in existence they could not afford to provoke, and buying their lives back with money was already a colossal stroke of luck. While Hyun and the masters were trading, the mosquito had already flapped over to land beside the charcoal corpse of the ink-shaped black turtle. Most of the big guy had been blasted into ruin by the lightning, but a few parts were still relatively intact and giving off rich blood chi. And the mosquito was not picky in the least. He drove his crimson molten heart demon sting straight into a stretch of reasonably whole turtle leg meat. The system chimed that the mosquito had absorbed 17.8 and 8 blood Q chi, bringing his total to 483, and that once done, the mosquito would net 3.5 evolution points, for a total of 72.4. Not bad at all, he thought. Even with only a low-level bloodline, put out a quality and quantity of blood chi no first-grade thing could match. His blood chi sat at 483 now, just 17 shy of the 500 mark. So once this batch finished, the mosquito would take one more sip, and as long as he pulled in another 17 points, the 500 he needed for the 4th evolution would finally be gathered. Sean silently counted through the life, buying money the masters had left, picking out the useful pieces, and it had to be said that no one who walked the say formations came from a plain background. 20 minutes later, the system finally sounded that digestion was complete, and the mosquito had gained 3.5 evolution points for a running total of 72.4. His spirits jumped, and he did not waste one more bite and the mosquito could break through. And the system announced the mosquito had absorbed 18.9 for a total of 501.9. That his blood she had crossed the 500 mark. That his rank had risen, and that he now stood at 2nd grade early stage. It was done. He felt as though a volcano had erupted inside him, his blood ki boiling in a single instant and washing through every limb, a power several times what the mosquito had before, flooding every cell, the dark red patterns on his carapace, brightening and scalding, each flap of his wings running hotter than ever, only a dozen odd points. And yet his combat power had at least doubled, because breaking the blood chief threshold into a new realm was never as simple as bumping a number up. This feels incredible, he crowed inwardly. And if he ran into a first-grade peak martial artist like Yu Yang now, one explosive flame-flying feather would erase him before he even reached for a secret technique, because this aura was 2nd grade early stage, which meant it had broken through yet again. Her brain felt like it had short-circuited. She, the reborn empress, had risked her life cultivating a forbidden evil art, and even leaning on all her past life experience. On a normal technique, that speed would have stunned the whole Korean Federation and earned the title of a peerless genius unseen in 1,000 years. And the mosquito did nothing but suck blood sleep and suck more blood. And its strength climbed like it was strapped to a rocket, roaring up until it even surpassed her. The first time she had laid eyes on this mosquito. Back then, an ordinary white-striped mosquito, with a blood chi of 1/100th of a point, the weakest bottom-tier creature in the world. Now it was a demonic beast at 2nd grade early stage that could crush a first-grade peak martial artist's without breaking stride. The corner of her mouth twitched, her common sense pinned to the floor and ground to dust by this mosquito once again. She drew a deep breath, forced the storm in her chest down, and asked in a slightly hoarse voice whether he still wanted to suck blood. Such a big chunk, he protested, eyeing the turtle's remains that were still more than half whole. It was all pure blood chi and evolution points, so how about tucking it into the beast-taming bag to go? The instant the thought formed, he felt the bag at Hyun's waist give a small tremble. One of the lion cubs, asking whether this was a buffet its mama had brought it. Who is your mama? He thought. And hold on, is that even remotely logical? Han glanced at him, seeming to read his mind, and swept every remaining blood-she-bearing scrap into Yumi's storage bag. It was safe in there, since the mosquito had no intention of handing that little idiot, who called everyone mama, a free meal. Han rolled her eyes at a loss for what to do with either of us, then took him and slipped off toward the deepest, most desolate corner of the realm. She figured that in her past life, this was likely where Yu Yang had refined the crystal. Yun set up a simple warning and concealment formation at the mouth, walked deep inside, and carefully lifted the crystal out of the storage bag. And the moment it appeared, the dim cave lit up with a soft, sacred starlight, and she could even see that the light was half substantial. Wisps of it drifting around the crystal like flowing sand. Energy purified to the utter extreme. As long as she absorbed it, her spiritual power talent would take another qualitative leap. Her gift in her past life had been hailed as first across all the ages, but only along the path of beast taming. Yet, stepping into the king realm would be like reaching for heaven, to say nothing of the unreachable emperor realm. But if her talent climbed further, maybe in this life she would not even need to wait for her blood chi to hit the 5th grade before, and perhaps she could master every branch of spiritual power at once. Formations, mentalism, and beast taming together. More than that, absorbing the crystal would surely break her spiritual power realm into the 2nd grade in one leap. At the thought, her eyes drifted to him on her shoulder, a faintly smug curve tugging at her lips. She told herself on the level of spiritual power, she was the eternal king. And as long as the blood contract held, the mosquito would never slip her control. But at that very moment, she felt her shoulder go light. The mosquito had lifted off and settled directly onto the crystal in her hand. And under her instantly frozen blank stare, it leveled its crimson proboscis at the surface and took a light little sip. If you're not going to absorb it, then he will. The next second, the half-huilized stirlso sipped it, swirling around the crystal, seemed to find a drain and came pouring steadily into his mouthparts. The system reported ultra-high purity spiritual energy and began absorption, pinging gains in a frantic rolling stream. 25.5, 36.1, 55.8, one after another. It tallied a total of 189.2 points of spiritual power absorbed. His running total now 220.8, and announced his spiritual power realm had broken clean through to. Mosquito had drawn in was extremely pure and gentle, with no side effects. So fierce, just one gentle mouthful, and his spiritual power went from having no realm at all, straight to 1st grade mid-stage. Already level with the empress, his mind felt clearer than it ever had. Every mote of dust in the air, every fine line on the distant rock wall, even the faint, cool fragrance rising off Hyun beneath him, clean as the sky after snowfall, turned incredibly clear and three-dimensional, as though the mosquito could brush them with his very spirit. The speed of his thoughts reached an inconceivable level, a sense of seeing through everything worlds beyond, the raw power that plain blood sucking gave. The trouble was that all this energy left his head swollen and tight like a balloon crammed full of water, and pushed to the edge of bursting. And the system said it would take a full 2 hours to fully digest. If it has a physical form, it can be sucked. The logic holds. The mosquito had worried he might have to grind a crystal, this hard, into powder, and used some method too crude to mention. Just stick the tube in. He cast a greedy glance at the still brilliant crystal below, and felt his swollen head with a pang of regret, since such a fine thing deserved more mouthfuls. Nearby, Hyun had frozen solid, her cool eyes wide and round, her lashes trembling with shock as her gaze flicked between the crystal, visibly dimmed a notch, and the mosquito perched on it. It could directly absorb a spirit-nurturing crystal, its structure incredibly stable, and only a heaven-ranked technique like her Tiaho contemplation art could safely refine it. Absorbing it by pure physical means was unheard of, and she could not fathom how a body withstood it. With one understated sip, the light had dimmed a visible amount. And worse, its spiritual power had surged to first-grade mid-stage in an instant, the very same as her own. She swept her spiritual power carefully across the mosquito, and her heart took a hammer blow because its total was actually higher than hers by a margin. And at that her composure collapsed, being outstripped in blood vitality. She could endure since the side effects of the 10,000 Beasts Furnace art were too severe to cultivate fast. And besides, as her natal spirit pet faster the mosquito grew, the more she gained. As the beast-taming empress across 2 lifetimes, the greatest reliance that had let her look down on all living things in her past life. Most critical of all, if a contract beast's spiritual power climbed past its master's, it might devour that master. No, she thought. Absolutely not. Gritting her teeth and clamping the crystal tight. The crystal's energy was finite, so she had to draw out as much as she could before her digestion finished. Hyun took a deep breath, cast off every last shred of hesitation, and sat cross-legged with a solemn face, pressing the crystal to her forehead and shutting her eyes, circulating the Tieho contemplation art like a woman possessed, and drinking down the pure energy at an unprecedented speed. Stingy, he thought. Is it really necessary to race him for food this hard, just because his spiritual power edged out yours by a hair? Still, his head was genuinely swollen, like the mosquito had thrown back 3 pounds of rock gut liquor, and he digest first. The fullness in his spirit did not touch the hunger in his body. With a thought, his spiritual power, now up at first-grade mid-stage, acted like an invisible hand and slid into the storage bag the mosquito had taken off Yumyong, whose spiritual imprint had scattered the moment he died, leaving the bag ownerless and open to anyone whose spiritual power reached the first grade. He rummaged inside and soon fished out the pieces of the ink jade black turtle. Among them was a small section of charred head, and he weighed the blackened skull a long while. Plunging his mouth parts deep in, the system chimed that the mosquito had absorbed 19.5 blood chief, for a total of 521.4, that the blood would digest in about 18 minutes, for an estimated 4.1 evolution points. And then came the line the mosquito had been waiting for, that his accumulated evolution points had reached 80.3, that the conditions for the 4th evolution were met. This trip into the Blackstone's secret realm had paid out an epic jackpot, and the moment he got back, the mosquito could kick it off. He wondered what the mosquito would look like on the other side, whether the mosquito would grow bigger, sprout more handsome wings, or pick up a few extra pairs of sharp claws. And full of anticipation, he lounged on the cool turtle shell, savoring the twin pleasure of spiritual power and blood vitality, digesting side by side. On the square, a temporary scoring station in Medical Point had gone up, teachers tallying scores with grim faces, while directing medics to treat the wounded. Hand over proof of a kill, an iconic part like a claw, an eyeball, or a fang, and trade it for points. That last figure was basically theoretical, since in the entire history of Gang City's high school, no candidate had ever killed a second-grade mid-stage beast, alone or in a team. For most candidates, even a 5-person squad counted itself lucky to bring down a few first-grade mid-stage beasts. And a first-grade late-age beast was a challenge only the top student of each class could dream of facing. Just then, a clamor broke out, and everyone turned toward the exit. It's Lee Wolio and her Phantom Sound Spirit Fox's first-grade peak. So, this team could fight even a second-grade early-stage beast. She set a heavy backpack on the scoring table and asked the teacher to count the points. And demonic by feast materials, tangled with blood, spilled out and piled up like a small mountain. And once he finished, he announced it loudly. Lee Wolio's team, 15 first grade, early stage, 8 mid-stage, 6 late stage, and on top of that, the whole venue erupted like a pot come to a rolling boil, because the highest team out before them had barely scraped 48. The teacher added that by the team's agreed distribution, Captain Lee Wolio's contribution came to 60%, putting her individual score at 81 points, a figure that left everyone else eating dust, since the previous highest individual score had been only 32. Lee Wolio said it was just good luck, though the slight upward tilt of her lips gave away the pride underneath. A result like that would have placed top 3 in any previous assessment, and Gang City's highest individual record stood at only 85, held by a senior, now a legendary figure at a top spirit Marshall University in Dunan City with limitless prospects. Top 3 was locked in. The heavy stone in her chest finally dropped. Because that had been her whole goal. Break into the top 3. And she would draw the eyes of first-rate universities. And paired with a steady showing in the joint examination, a spot was as good as sealed. A future earned step by hard-won step. By leaning on a mosquito with heaven-defying intelligence. That girl had scooped up the privileges of the city lord's mansion. And a guaranteed slot. Trace of pity crossed Lee Wolio's eyes, since that school beauty's remaining days were destined to be those of a canary kept in a cage, a subject for others to study. Her whole future already visible from here to its dead end. But, right after, Jim's brow drew tight, and he looked toward the exit, with worry, asking why Hyun still had not come out, when the time was nearly up. By rights, the weaker student should have emerged long ago, since every extra minute in a beast-infested realm meant another notch of danger. A first-grade late-stage martial artist carrying a first-grade early-stage mosquito, with basically zero combat power. Lasting this long inside was in itself not quite normal. Nothing must happen to this young lady. Immune fretted, and Jong Song-ya's face was none too pleasant either, since the two knew better than anyone the sheer value Yun and her mosquito now represented. Over in a corner, Nong Yan watched their anxious faces and sneered to herself. To be sure nothing slipped through, she had spent a fortune, not only bribing several candidates ranked in the top 20, but also buying off that aloof, #1 spiritual mentalist, Jin Pong. Ningyan sneered inwardly, and stayed on the surface as cold and rippleless as a well. All she needed to do now was wait. Wait for the news of Hyun's death to be confirmed, and the suspicious gazes to swing her way. And then she would meet every investigation with the... Just then, the warped light gate flickered violently once more, and two figures walked out almost side by side. When people saw who they were, the square fell silent and broke into another wave of noise. It was Zhou Chan-xian. And Zhou, the #1 of the beast-taming department, and the #1 of the martial arts department. Someone guessed they had fought in the realm, and someone else disagreed, pointing out that for all their wounds, those injuries were clearly from battling beasts, not from tearing into each other, and wondered aloud whether the two had actually cooperated. Under everyone's eyes, the two walked to the scoring desk, and Zhou Chun-chun spoke first. When the teacher saw what lay inside, his hands trembled, because along with a large amount of first-grade, late-stage, and first-grade peak material, there were 2 heads of second-grade early-stage beasts getting off powerful auras. He sucked in a sharp, cold breath and with shaking hands. It took him over a minute to finish counting before he looked up. Zhou Changcheng and Zhu's team 8 first-grade late kills, 3 first-grade peak, and 1 each of the second-grade early-stage demonic beasts, a black armored earth dragon, and a 3-eyed demonic ape, for a total team score of 240 points, and by their equal split individual scores of 120 apiece. Every student struck dumb, and Lee Wolio, who had just been so pleased with her 81, felt her expression freeze. Then the venue detonated, the record broken. Gang City High School's all-time practical assessment mark, utterly crushed, and someone gasped that the two of them together had actually killed 2 second-grade early-stage beasts, asking whether they were even human. This was the treatment he deserved, the focus of 10,000 gazes. Just before entering the realm, his family had sent word through special channels that the provincial education department director would personally hand out a valuable reward for first place. Confident as he was, he had not dared claim first for certain, since Ju's strength matched his own. So, when the two happened to meet, he had proposed teaming up to push their scores to the ceiling, tie for first, and split the director's reward, with the school's record-breaking rewards on top. But just as Zhou Chanshan was bracing for the cheers, Zhu Ge pulled something else out of his pocket with a blank face. The teacher instinctively asked whether the team had killed it together, and Jug shook his head, tone still level, saying no, he had killed it on his own before they teamed up and had forgotten to mention it. The smug smile froze solid on Zhou Chong's face. The teacher's expression turned deeply strange, and he silently added 1 point after Jude's name. On the square, the cheers cut off short, everyone looking at Jug with strange eyes, because the move, while not against the rules, was just too underhanded. He whipped around and drowned the words out through his teeth, demanding to know whether Zhou Ge was playing dirty. And Edjoy only gave him a faint glance, and said he had simply forgotten, and if Zhou Chongchan thought it unfair, he could forfeit the point. The man had said it in front of every teacher and student, and now claimed he did not want it purely why to disgust him. Joe Gay ignored him, and the strange looks alike. The path of martial arts was one where, if you did not advance, you retreated, and seizing every resource that could make you stronger by any means was the only truth. Take first today and collect the double reward. And his strength would climb another level. And once he became a truly powerful expert, who would dare gossip about his character? Behind his back, just like Hyun, he thought. In the end, she lacked the power to match them, and she would only ever become a precious lab rat the Federation kept caged, stripped of freedom and future. Up on the rostrum, the leaders held mixed opinions about Ju's stunt, but Jang Sung-yap and Im Jin-nam no longer had the heart to care about such trifles. Blurred into motion and drifted down from the rostrum dozens of meters up, walking straight for the exit. Certain, the top leaders were coming to praise them since their 3 scores had left the whole field far behind and locked in the top 3. But the scene that followed turned their hearts cold. Jang Sang-yap and Im Jin-nam walked straight past them, and the director asked in an extremely anxious tone whether any of the students had seen Hyun inside the realm. Joe Chung-chun's went black. Even Joe, whose heart was usually as still as water, frowned deeply and felt an intense discomfort. And it turned out that in the eyes of these top leaders, they still could not measure up to a lucky pretty schoolbelle, only because she had contracted a mosquito with heaven-defying intelligence, and Hyun herself was nothing more than a first-grade latest-stage martial artist. So why should she draw such attention? The unwillingness and jealousy in Joe Chang-sin's heart nearly boiled over, and here he still was not being noticed. So he released his contract beast, the azure-armored wolf, straight out of the beast-taming bag. A powerful aura far exceeding first-grade peak, sweeping out at once, and the whole audience turned shocked eyes on it in unison. This was the aura of second-grade early stage. Joey's pupils shrank sharply, an expression of extreme astonishment crossing his face for the first time, as he remembered that in the realm, Joe Chung-chan had peeled off from the teen alone for over half an hour on the pretext of searching for prey. Beside then, Leo was shaken even harder, the last scrap of pride from her 81 draining away, as she bit down on her lip. Second-grade early stage. Jang Sung-yap and Amina murmured, both taken aback, casting Joe Chong-chong a surprised glance for the first time. 18 years old, and a contract beast at second grade. Early stage, a talent that would rate his excellent, even in the provincial capital of Dunan City. Not bad, Im Jin-nam allowed, saying he was very good. Then pausing to remind him seriously that he must not fixate on his contract beast's strength while neglecting his own spiritual power since once a beast's. The tragedy of the beast turning on the master became very likely. He threw his chest out and assured the city lord that his spiritual power had also reached first grade stage, enough to easily control a third-grade realm contract beast. The news landed even more explosive than the last, everyone looking at him as if at a monster. Beast tamers actually chase spiritual power realms far less hard than spiritual mentalists and formation masters, because most beast spiritual power lags well behind their vitality realm. So a beast tamer need only hold at first-grade mid-stage to keep firm control. The effort and resources that must have taken were staggering. First-grade latest-stage spiritual power. Jang Sung-yup marveled, saying that even in the beast-taming department of Dun and First Yonggu High School, he could walk into the elite class, a genuine prospect for the Hong Yongdae tier. And he turned to Im Jin-nam to say the city lord should keep closer eye on him going forward. This was exactly the effect he had wanted, proved to everyone that he was the undisputed strongest genius of Gang City's year. At the peak in assessment score, in contract beast realm, and in personal spiritual power alike in Hyun. Aside from good luck, she was nothing, just a trophy girl who could never take the stage. Her expression calm, her steps composed, her combat suit clean, but for a little dust, as if she had not gone through a brutal assessment at all, but merely taken a walk in her own back garden. Seeing her safe and sound, City Lord Im Jin-nam and Jang Sung-yup both let out a breath. In the corner of the rostrum, the cold smile froze on Nong Yan's face, her eyes flying wide, fixed on that figure with disbelief. What about the assassin she had spent a fortune to buy? A first-grade latest-stage spiritual mentalist, plus 7 or 8 elite examinees, an inescapable dragnet, and they could not even handle one first-grade latest-stage martial artist and a trashy mosquito. On the other side, Joe Changkin watched Hyun with a playful look, finally willing to come out. Judging by how clean she looked, she had probably found a corner to hide. in the second she entered and simply toughed it out. Under everyone's gaze, Hyun walked straight to the scoring table and calmly lifted 2 items out of her storage bag, setting them gently down, and everyone leaned in and stalled. It was a pitch-black giant neck of some kind, looking like it had been struck by lightning, and a sharp scorpion tail shimmering with a metallic sheen. After a full 8 hours in the realm, she had hunted only 2 demonic beasts, and the surrounding students traded glances, their expressions turning odd. Zhou Chongchong nearly could not hold in his laughter. Surely, she had not just killed 2 first-grade early-stage beasts, would only come to 20, could not possibly be first-grade peak beasts, since with her strength, she would never have come back alive, and even 2 of those would only make 40 points. Zhou did not spare Hyun even a glance, since whether this campus belle got 2 points, 10 or 40 made no difference to him. And Imyan Jang Sung Yop and all the leaders did not. More precisely, they had never cared about her score from the start, since at most it would be 20 or 30 points. But behind the scoring table, the teacher in charge, after seeing those 2 items, felt the expression on his face slowly freeze. With trembling hands, he carefully picked up the tips of turtle flesh and leaned in to examine the scorpion tail, his face growing more astonished by the second. And this scorpion stinger, it was from a second-grade mid-stage demonic beast, the Sand Sea Venomous Scorpion. 200 points. 2 second-grade mid-stage demonic beasts, the scoring teacher repeated, and then the number came out of his mouth, like something he could not quite believe himself. 200 points. Leaders lined up along the rostrum. All of them stared at the 2 demonic beast materials laid on the scoring table as if their eyes had failed. And that scorpion tail, still flickering with an eerie glow, was the sting of a second-grade mid-stage Sand Sea Venomous Scorpion. Zhou Chanshan's smile froze on his face, and he flat-out refused to accept it, demanding the teacher check again, because it simply could not be right. Beside him, Zhu fared worse, his pupils shrinking to points in raw shock. A man who had not even lost his composure like this, when he learned Zhou Changshan's contract beast had broken through to second-grade early stage. Every candidate there understood the cruel arithmetic of it, that the higher the grade, the wider the gulf between small stages grew until it yawned like a canyon. The blood chi threshold for second-grade early stage was 500 points, but second-grade's mid demanded a full 1,000. Zhou Changshan and Zhou Ge had joined forces and burned everything just to barely down 2 second-grade early-stage beasts, and even that had left them spent. Run into a second-grade mid-stage beast, and neither would have found the nerve to raise a hand. The sole group that stood any chance against one was the Formation Masters, and even they needed 7 or 8, working in concert, draining every drop of spiritual power to wear one down, and it was worth only a 100-point split 8 ways. Almost nothing each, when they could have hunted a fistful of second-grade early-stage beasts for the same effort. The ordinary ones lacking the ability, and the Formation Masters finding it a thankless waste. And now Hyun stood there with 2 of them on the table. Then the veteran scoring teacher noticed something, and said it out loud that there was a strong lingering fluctuation of formation energy, clinging to the turtle meat, which meant this ink jade black turtle had almost certainly been killed by a formation. Of course, in the entire examination, the only group that could threaten a second-grade mid-stage beast was that batch of Formation Masters, and given enough time and materials to raise a proper killing formation, wearing one down was theoretically possible. Someone in the crowd voiced the most obvious guess, that the formation major had banded together, sets up a formation, and fought to the death to bring down the ink jade black turtle. And only when they were drained and helpless had Hyun swooped in to snatch the spoils. One voice sneering that, of course, she could not have killed a second-grade mid-stage beast herself. A few grumbled that a girl this beautiful stooping to something so shameless was hard to stomach, while others waved it off as pure dumb fortune. Zhou Changchong and Zhou Ge both let out the same slow breath, because that they could accept even if it still stung. Whoever turned in the spoils earned the points, but only if the actual killer raised no objection. And any dispute kicked the whole thing into a far messier procedure. And soon, Brother Zhang and his 7 companions shuffled over with pale faces and trembling hearts under the weight of every stare. He pointed at the turtle meat and asked in a heavy voice whether they had killed this ink jade black turtle. Brother Janong and the others exchanged a single glance and read the same naked terror in one another's eyes. So, Brother Jang shook his head hard enough to rattle and rush to deny everything, insisting it absolutely was not them, that they could never have that kind of power. That student Hyun had killed it. What was going on with these formation masters? Faces bloodless. Why did the most arrogant people on the field, the ones who normally strolled around with their noses in the air, suddenly looked this frightened? Hyun swept them a faint glance and asked mildly whether it truly was not them who had killed it. Look at his memory failing him in his old age. These formation masters were genuinely bone-deep, afraid of Hyun, and nobody could work out why. Jo Chong-chun's mouth twitched, feeling his intelligence personally insulted, and he told Brother Jang that if he was being threatened, he should just blink. At that, Brother Jang and the rest went wide-eyed and held their eyes open by force, refusing to blink even once. Hyun did not bother playing along with them any longer, and simply stated the truth, that the ink-jawed black turtle had indeed been killed by them, and she had only picked up the leftovers. Brother Jang and his companions shook their heads while their eyeballs bulged, swearing they had no objection at all. That the capable should have it. The capable should have it. She had simply run into it on her way, out of the secret realm, and killed it in passing. In passing, the scoring teacher's brain stalled on the phrase, and the crowds did too. Killed a second-grade mid-stage beast in passing, as if she were some second-grade peak martial artist, and voices broke out insisting that even a liar had to have some shame. Nobody bragged like that. He sat on her shoulder and enjoyed every second of it. Jo Chong-chien's mouth twitched again, laughing in helpless fury, and he challenged her to explain how she and that first-grade early-stage mosquito of hers had just happened to kill a second-grade. And in his opinion, she had gotten lucky and stumbled onto 2 corpses in the secret realm. He had stopped caring about the score entirely. When his contract beast's realm and his spiritual power both left hers in the dust, and nobody could ride luck forever, the students around him nodded along, feeling the vase. School Beauty's fortune had grown genuinely obscene, that it was already too much to contract a mosquito with heaven-defying intelligence. But Jug Lee Wolio, City Lord Majinimum, Jong Song, Yop, and a cluster of leaders all frowned, sensing it was not that simple. Because if it were only luck, why did those arrogant formation masters shake in their boots around her? Han glanced at Jo Chong-chien, the corner of her mouth curving into a barely visible arc, and agreed that yes, her luck was indeed very good. She had also been fortunate enough to snatch a spirit-nurturing crystal from these gentlemen. Great aunt. Why keep grinding salt into the wound? The surrounding examinees mostly blinked in confusion, murmuring that they had never heard of a spirit-nurturing crystal. Asking whether it was some heaven-defying treasure, changed color the instant the words left her mouth. Wondering whether she was spouting nonsense. Because how could a thing like that surface in a primary secret realm? Up on the rostrum, a middle-aged man in a white robe, faint light, drifting between his brows, shot to his feet and exclaimed the name aloud. He fixed his eyes on Hyun and swept her with his massive spiritual power without the slightest reserve. And a heartbeat later, his face lit with wild excitement as he slapped his thigh and declared that it truly was the aura of a spirit-nurturing crystal. This man was the vice president of the Provincial Spiritual Mentalist Association, a 7th-grade spiritual mentalist, and his words sent the leaders on the rostrum reeling. They asked whether there was truly a spirit-nurturing crystal here, someone half shouting in disbelief that it was a heaven-tier supreme treasure, born only in calamity-level secret realms. Zhang Sang-yap's expression shifted, and he asked President Wang whether he was certain, and President Wang said it with total conviction that his perception could not be wrong. Noticing the confusion in many eyes around him, he explained offhandedly, for those who did not cultivate spiritual power, not only vastly raising spiritual power, but more crucially cleansing the spiritual origin itself, and lifting a person's spiritual talent ceiling. One such crystal, he said, was enough to forge a future king-level powerhouse, and divine objects like it usually had only the faintest chance of forming in the depths of calamity-level secret realms. Leaders and students alike, hard enough to warm the planet a degree. Forge a king-level powerhouse, a being that guarded a whole province, that looked down upon all living things and stood among them like a god. The leaders could no longer sit still, whispering among themselves, their eyes on high and brimming with shock, greed, and fanatic hunger. President Wang could not hold himself back and was the first on his feet, telling her with heavy gravity that a supreme treasure like the spirit-nurturing crystal was a national strategic resource. Absolutely not. He advised her for the sake of the Federation and to spare herself the disaster that possessing such a treasure would invite to hand it over of her own accord, promising that the Spiritual Mentalist Association, and indeed the whole Federation, would never treat her unfairly, agreeing that an innocent man could still be condemned by the treasure he carried, that a first-grade martial artist simply could not protect a supreme treasure, and surrendering it was the wisest, most correct choice. Jong Sung-yeop and City Lord Mjinimum said nothing, only shaking their heads inwardly, thinking the girl was still a student after all, a bit too naive. A treasure of this caliber, once spoken of in public, could no longer belong to any one person, and what followed would be mere theater. Letting her volunteer it, handing her a certificate of honor and a token bonus. Zhou Chungchong, Zhou Gai, and Li Wulio looked at Hyun, the way one looks at an idiot, marveling that she had obtained such a treasure, and instead of hiding it, dared to announce it in the open, which, if it was not pure stupidity, was hard to name. She spoke plainly, her voice carrying clear across the whole venue, telling the leaders she was sorry, but the spirit-nurturing crystal had already been refined and absorbed by her. The instant her voice fell, a spiritual power far stronger, far purer, far more majestic than Zhou Changchun's earlier surge erupted from her body and swept out in every direction like an invisible tide. The whole venue crashed into dead silence a second time. The righteous expressions on the principal and the dean froze solid, and the leaders who had been pressing and persuading opened their mouths and found not a word left in them. The first to react was President Wang, the very man who moments earlier had loomed so grandly while forcing her to surrender the treasure. And then he slapped his thigh and boomed with praise, calling it wonderful. Well absorbed, declaring that heroes emerged from the young, that student Hyun's courage and decisiveness were extraordinary. Her path to the king level now assured that Suim Young province had bred itself a dragon. The examinees below could only gape, agreeing that to stake one's life for finding a heaven-tier treasure on the spot took a courage that shamed them all. In seconds, the whole rostrum performed a flawless round of stage. The mosquito could only sit there thinking 666. Off to the side, Zhou Changchan had gone stiff as a carved wooden chicken, his head buzzing. He had never imagined she could be this clever and ruthless, because refining a spirit-nurturing crystal required a heaven-tier spiritual power method where the refiner would likely explode and die. Meanwhile, everyone finally understood how she had killed the Sand's venomous scorpion in passing. Since with spiritual power at second-grade mid-stage, even basic spiritual attacks posed a lethal threat to a beast whose own spiritual power ran far below its blood realm. Zhou Changchong roared inside, teeth grinding nearly to powder, demanding of the sky on what grounds any one person's luck could run this good, that she would be at least a ninth-grade expert someday, and might well step into the king level. And the jealousy scorched him, because reason told him he had already lost completely to the Yun standing before him. And he could neither admit nor accept it, that whatever her spiritual talent, her contract beast was still a trash first-grade early-stage mosquito with a low-level bloodline. No hope of reaching 5th grade this life, while his own floor was 7th grade. So on that one point at least, he stood above her. The leaders reached the same conclusion and wore looks of pity, thinking, what a shame it was, leaving her only the lower ceiling paths of formation master or spiritual mentalist, neither of which had ever produced an emperor level. Just as they were all busy pitying her, Han turned her head and looked at the little nether flame mosquito perched quietly on her shoulder, still clinging to that tired game of hiding one's strength. The mosquito was already this magnificent, so the mosquito was going to manifest his divinity in front of every last one of them, because to do otherwise was to walk through the night in embroidered silk, seen by no one. Today, the mosquito would use raw crushing strength and talent to overturn how these high officials saw him, to make them understand that Hyun and he were not lab rats to be manipulated and said. A majestic bloodshee of second-grade early stage, not one hair inferior to Zhou Changqin's azure-armored wolf, erupted from his tiny body, and on its heels, an undisguised bloodline pressure rolled out. Mid-level bloodline. The mosquito had noticed it checking his panel earlier, that once his blood key realm broke into second-grade early stage. By this world's theory, that alone lifted his growth ceiling from 3rd grade to 5th grade. Before anyone could recover, he loosed one more thought, and another force poured out. A dense spiritual power aura that had likewise reached second-grade early stage, since the crystal's energy had pushed his own spiritual power past 500 points. Blood Shi and bloodline and spiritual power hammering everyone's nerves. If Hyun's spiritual power had been a depth charge across the square, the triple aura off this tiny mosquito was a nuclear bomb at the center of the lake, and it blanked out every brain. Eyes bulging, mouths hanging open, the whole square petrified together. A soft thud rang out, and everyone turned to find Zhou Changcheng with lifeless eyes and an ashen face. His lips trembled without sound, his pupils reflecting that little mosquito in its impossible aura, the last of his pride, crushed to dust. The contract beast realm he was so proud of had been matched by a mosquito that stood at first grade early stage 3 days ago. His spiritual power, once beyond his peers, was not only crushed by Hyun, but topped by this insect 2 full levels above him. Even the final comfort that its trash bloodline could never reach. Its ceiling now 5th grade too. His whole mentality detonated, and all that storm inside him came out as one muttered whisper asking whether they were hacking. City Lord Mjinam swallowed hard, turned to Jung Sung Yope, and stammered out whether he was hallucinating. But Jang Sung Yope could not answer, drowning in the same trance. Why could a mosquito's blood chi soar from 1st grade early stage to 2nd grade early stage in 3 days? And why had its bloodline rank climbed again, unless it had evolved once more days after its last? Jang Sang Yope had pored over Yun's records, and remembered clearly that she had been a martial arts student for 3 straight years, and only a week ago had suddenly contracted a white-striped mosquito. A scrap of trash with blood she near 0. And no bloodline then evolved it 3 days ago to its present shape at Lowell 5-star. And now 3 more days on apparently evolved it. And his eye twitched because evolving 3 times in under half a month was a joke when evolution was the rarest, most precious chance a beast could get, one most never received even once. Province leaders like Zhang Song Yope and President Wang, gang city big shots like Imjam and Nang Yan, even the geniuses below the stage. This mosquito could not be measured by any theory or common sense. And Haune, fated for the king rank after absorbing the crystal, had contracted such a monster, the potential of that pairing near unthinkable. Even if its bloodline locked forever, its ceiling already reached 5th grade, meaning she could contract a 2nd or 3rd, stronger beast later. King rank was near certain. Jang Sung Yop's lips trembled and he shouted to report it. He told City Lord Im Jinam in a tone that bicked no argument that the secrecy had to be raised to the highest tier immediately, that they must report straight to the Federal Ministry of Education and the Beast Tamer Association headquarters, because this was no longer something province alone could handle. And here his voice went grave as never before, weighing each word, not as some experimental subject, but as a true top-tier genius. Immune swallowed and nodded slowly, knowing he was right, that across the tens of billions in the whole Federation, there were only a handful of registered emperor-ranked powerhouses, each a pillar of the nation, and their gang. City had produced a future emperor. From beginning to end, Joy sighed. He watched Hyun's back, remembering how he had counted on a single point of advantage to suppress Zhou Changchanxi's 1st place and collect the richest resources. And how laughable that looked now, because she had never cared about these so-called geniuses at all. Principal half sobbed to old Wang, asking whether they had offended a future king-rank powerhouse, and the dean, near tears, corrected him that by Director Janong's, meaning it was more than king rank. It was someone with hope of the emperor rank. In all of Gang City, the strongest was Immune at the peak of 8th grade, and king rank stood above the 9th grade entirely, while emperor rank was a legend no one in all of Sumyong province dared dream of. On another side, the president of the Yangchip Guild turned to the ashen-faced Nang Yan and sighed slowly, his eyes graver than ever, telling her that they should go and apologize to her. Ning Yan's body jerked, and she looked up sharply, her cold eyes full of unwillingness and refusal. Apologize to the woman who had stolen her opportunity and cost the life of her teammate. She, Nangjing Yan, would never bow her head, not if it killed her. He told her that he knew her pride, but she had to understand that Hyun was no longer someone they could afford to provoke. That if she refused to bow today, the entire Kyong Guild could be wiped out because of her, once the girl came into her power. And she never felt it. And then without a word, she turned on her heel and strode off the rostrum, without a backward glance, fishing into the distance. Then the mood in the square shifted yet again. Imjanam and President Wang exchanged a few words and rose to their feet in unison. Under the stunned gaze of thousands of students, they formed a line and walked toward Hyun with solemn steps, looking less like officials on an inspection than like courtiers going to pay homage to a sovereign. Jang Song-yopi reached her first, drawing a medicinal pill, thick with the aura of life from his storage ring, telling her it was a sixth-grade creation pill from his private collection, a sacred healing medicine, a meeting gift from her elder, and hoping she would not think it beneath her. A mysterious tier mid-rank spiritual tool called Purple Lightning Green Frost, only a support tool, but one that greatly sped spiritual power recovery, which with her high cultivation suited her perfectly. President Wang was more generous still, producing a secret manual from the bottom of his chest, an Earth-tier low-rank mental technique called the Thousand Soul Piercer, a token from the Spiritual Mentalist Association. Then the principal, the dean, and representatives of every force swarmed in, scrambling to give gifts with fawning smiles. Han said nothing, only thinking privately how realistic this crowd was. That she, the empress, truly disdained mixing with such people. He cut in fast to tell her to take it. All of it too. Stop just standing there, because this was the whole point of showing our potential, that it was resources, every bit of it, resources, and letting them slip would be a crime. Hyun ringed by big shots, her hands going numb from gift after gift while he lay on her shoulder, happily watching the treasures pile up in the storage bag. With a thought, he opened the panel, his race read as Molten Blood Mosquito, still evolvable, bloodline at intermediate Onir, blood key at 589 point, and spiritual power at 511 point, blood food tracking at level 3, molten insect hive at level 4, explosive flame flying feather at level 3, both met, ready at any time over 24 hours. Staring at that panel, he felt outrageously comfortable. The mosquito had banked enough to trigger the fourth evolution whenever he pleased. He only wondered which way it would take him, since the direction seemed to hinge on whose blood the mosquito had drunk. The bulk of his feeding had been the azure flame-flying lion cub, so it should lean that way. Though, with his spiritual power risen so far, he wondered whether that alone might tilt the result. He kept rubbing his forelimbs, anticipation cresting, only mildly annoyed that these idiot leaders would not stop gifting, and that every gift came with a long-winded speech. And once this wave was banked, the mosquito would find a safe place tonight and evolve. A high-speed train out of the provincial capital, Dunnan City, slid into Gang City Station. A young female teacher with a pretty face, and a male teacher with a gentle, steady air. The invigilator sent by Dunnan Number 1, Youngmu High School for Hyun's transfer assessment. The instant they caught the thin spiritual energy in the air, the female teacher, Wang Ri, knotted her brow and complained that there was not even a basic city spirit gathering formation underground. The male teacher, Yupong, gave her a helpless look and said her words carried a whiff of privilege, asking whether Gang City simply did not want to build one. She missed his speechlessness entirely and kept grumbling that they did not even know to build a basic city spirit gathering formation, that there was a reason for being backward, and that on top of it, they had no self-awareness, since some third year here dared apply to transfer into Dunnan Number 1. Born and raised in a first-tier provincial capital, she had never set foot in a city below second tier, let alone a remote county town like Gang City. A full day away by high-speed rail, and anyone would chafe at being packed off somewhere this remote for work. The gap between the two places at chasm, when even Dunnan Number 1's vice principal was an 8th-grade martial artist, strong enough to rival Gang City Lord. A top genius from a backwater like this would rate no better than an upper-middle honor student in Dunnan, and transferring in demanded at least 2nd grade early stage when, as far as she knew, Gang City had never produced a high schooler past 1st grade P. But the Education Bureau had its regulations, and they had to make the trip. The angrier she grew, the more she felt she might die of frustration, muttering that you really could not deny the old saying that poverty and meanness bred unruly people. Beside her, Yupong frowned almost imperceptibly and gently counseled her that there was no need for such anger, that educational resources and teaching staff in small cities were simply too poor, that the children here had limited horizons. He had climbed out of a small city himself, step by step, knew the hardships in his bones, and found such regional contempt distasteful. Wang Ri only curled her lip and said there was nothing harsh about the truth. Not wanting to continue, he changed the subject as they walked, mentioning he had heard the Provincial Education Bureau chief and some provincial government leaders had come to Gang City today, and wondering what for. Han's matter was strictly classified, so ordinary teachers like them naturally had no idea. Wang Ri, who had heard the same without much interest, guessed it was some grassroots outreach since today was the province-wide senior assessment. Then regret crossed her face, and she lamented that had she known, she would have set out earlier because she had missed it. It was hearing that President Wang of the Provincial Spiritual Mentalist Association had come too, a seventh favorite spiritual mentalist, one of the top powerhouses in Dunan. Wang Ri herself was a mid-grade 3 spiritual mentalist, and President Wang had long been her idol. Though the status between them was so vast, she had never once seen him in person. And within the same grade, ordinary martial artists were simply no match. So, a 7th-grade powerhouse like him could probably trade blows with a 9th-grade martial artist. That such a figure had come in person to a backwater like Gang City sent a wave of sympathy and admiration surging through her. A true role model, Yupin looked at that mix of sympathy and admiration and pity on her face and was utterly speechless, unable to follow his colleague's train of thought. He sighed, wanting only to finish the task and leave, and said they should hurry to Gang City Yongfart's My School since student Hyun should be back at the school by now. Hard cut inside the Gang City Lord's mansion, in a luxury suite normally reserved only for senior provincial officials. Hyun sat quietly on the sofa, calmly flipping through the earth Tier's secret technique, the 1,000-soul piercer that President Wang had given her. Around it, the medicinal pills and treasures the leaders had gifted, piled there without much care, were dimming and withering at a visible speed as boundless energy poured into the cocoon. That was right. The mosquito had evolved again, actually breaking the common sense of beast-taming history, to evolve a 4th time. By rights, she should be shocked and thrilled right now, since this meant her contract beast could very likely evolve without limit, its ceiling unimaginably high. Yet there was no ripple in her heart, and she wondered whether this guy had simply battered her, numb to shock. Only a short while ago, every soul at the assessment site, students and leaders alike, even Nong Yan, who had already left, had been hauled back to sign a top-tier federal confidentiality agreement. Its terms simple, that everything seen or heard today stayed sealed. The secrecy was pitched more than a notch higher than 3 days before, when there had been only a mosquito of heaven-defying intelligence. Now it had wholly changed. Perhaps the Emperor grade held strategic value, no less than nuclear weapons had before the spiritual energy recovery. A national treasure and a thorn in every hostile power side. And once her situation leaked, it would invite endless assassinations. When there was more than one nation in this world, and the Federation was not necessarily the strongest. A soft knock came at the suite door, and after Hyun quietly said to come in, Jang Sung-yo pushed it open and entered, his expression far graver than it had been out on the plaza. Both men's eyes were pulled at once to the pulsating blood-colored cocoon beside the sofa, and shock and horror surfaced on their faces together. President Wang could not contain himself and blurted out a question about what it was, plainly sensing the powerful life fluctuations rolling off it, asking whether it was evolving. President Wang stood dumbstruck, unable to fathom it since had they not just said it evolved once in the secret realm? So why was it evolving again now? Jang Seung-yop and President Wang could only stare. What if for no reason, raising its bloodline grade without evolving? Jang Seung-yop swallowed and could not help asking which evolution this made. Then this was the second, so it had only evolved once before, and was already this strong. This, Hyun told him, was its 4th evolution. And she added that it had been less than half a month. What manner of creature was this? Not only shattering the ironclad rule that beasts evolved only 3 times, but managing 4 in under half a month. They realized that even thinking its potential shocking, they had still vastly underestimated it. Hyun looked at them with an expression that said they really had not seen much of the world, and asked with a trace of impatience whether Bureau Chief Janong needed something from her. They had already reported her situation to the Federation, and the intent from above was clear that her safety came before all else, which meant she need not sit the joint entrance exam or transfer to Dunan No. 1 at all, where she could enroll at either Hwang University or Yan University, the 2 foremost institutions, and where her safety could be guaranteed to the fullest. It described treatment no student in the whole Federation would ever dare dream of. No, She could skip the joint entrance exam, but she had to transfer schools, and she would never attend Huang University or Yan University. As a student of Gang City, Youngmu High School, Zhang Shengyo was baffled, asking why, whether it made any difference. He opened his mouth, and for a moment found nothing to say. He knew well enough how the principal and dean of Gang City, Youngmu High, had treated her before. He had only not expected her to be quite this vengeful. But it did not matter, hardly a big deal. Merely moving a student record, a matter of a single sentence. He nodded, said he understood, gave up persuading her, took out his phone, and dialed the principal of Dun and number 1 directly. A panicked voice came back from the other end, stammering out his title and asking why the bureau chief was calling personally. Zhang Seong-yo got straight to the point, asking Principal Jin whether his school had recently received a transfer application for someone named Hyun. And a minute later, his voice returned to confirm that yes, they had, that it was indeed so, and they had already sent 2 teachers over to run her assessment. Principal Jin faltered, asking why, and Zhang Sung-yeop told him it concerned top-secret federal information and not to ask what he should not. And Principal Jin, badly startled, hurried to agree that he would handle it right away. After a pause, Principal Jin added with some difficulty that the 2 teachers they had sent for the assessment seemed to have nearly reached Gang City Youngmu High School, but were temporarily unreachable by. Zhang Song-yeop went quiet, only then recalling that to ensure secrecy he had just had someone install a signal jammer around the school. He hung up, thought a moment, turned to President Wang, who had been listening in silence, and raised a brow, suggesting he make a trip to tell those 2 teachers to go home. Zhang Seop said calmly that he knew how Dunan people were, their sense of superiority strong, their regard for small places like Gang City low, that the 2 teachers would likely have a poor attitude no ordinary person could hold in check. President Wang frowned, still displeased, thinking privately that they were just teachers a subordinate could handle, that he was no one's underling, and the Education Bureau had nothing to do with his spiritual mentalist association. He absolutely would not go, and he opened his mouth to invent an excuse. Then Hyun glanced at him and said softly that she would appreciate it. President Wang shuddered and snapped to attention, his face breaking into a flattered smile as he thumped his chest and swore it was no trouble at all. And then he spun around and strode out the door. Running errands for a future Emperor Realm powerhouse was a chance countless people would kill for and forget an errand. Jang Sang-yelp only gave his retreating back a speechless glance, that although it fell short of the capital, it was still one of the top 10 first-tier cities in the Federation, and far safer than Gang City, where he did not feel at ease. To be honest, she had long since had no wish to remain in this dump of a place. Its spiritual energy, pitifully thin, its resources scarce when emptying the whole city lord's mansion, could not yield a single earth-tier technique. But she glanced at the pulsing cocoon and said they should wait for it to finish evolving first. She thought it over since this guy's evolution time stretched longer each round. 10 hours last time, likely 15 or 16 now, and gave a conservative estimate of tomorrow around noon. He said he would return then and left, and the room fell quiet again. Hyun looked at the cocoon and quietly counted the hours, 15 or 16, and decided she would simply wait. She had been in meditation less than an hour when a crisp sound like an eggshell splitting rang out in the still room. Her eyes snapped open, and she looked toward the sound in astonishment to find the blood-cold cocoon already laced with spiderweb cracks. She sat dazed a moment, her gaze sliding instinctively to the sofa beside the cocoon, where the great heap of pills, spirit tools, and natural treasures had lost every trace of luster. Not a hint of energy fluctuation left. The leaders had gifted her too much, and there had been plenty of items in Yu Yang's storage bag as well. And it turned out that while this mosquito evolved, it had drained every one of those things dry. Before she could think further, the cocoon burst apart with a boom into a sky full of blood-colored light motes that scattered into the air. A brand new monster, ferocious and beautiful at once, slowly stretched itself out from within, and even numbed as she was, Hyun could not help clicking her tongue at the new form. With this evolution, his body had swelled again from about 10 centimeters to nearly 18, as large as an adult's palm. On his once pitch-black carapace, the dark red lava patterns had evolved into strange interwoven markings of deep blue and dark red. Hyun was startled, wondering whether the mosquito, having devoured so much spiritual power and spirit-nurturing crystal energy, had fused the power of the azure flame with its spiritual power outright. After evolving, whether it could even evolve like that, thinking it really did evolve according to whatever it sucked. Nor was that where the mosquito had changed most. Around his head drifted a ring of domineering light flame made of pure fire like a lion's mane, swaying faintly with his breath. Truly majestic. Even his signature thick, long proboscis had grown sturdier and more ferocious, longer by 2 centimeter wisps of blue-red firelight, coiling at its tip and giving off an eerie, dangerous air. The fourth evolution, Hyun murmured, had not only broken the ironclad law again, but taken the direction of evolution. Somewhere even more inconceivable. Then the newly evolved him circled excitedly in front of her twice, kicking up a scorching current, his buzz several times louder than before, loud enough to ache in her ears. Han could only think that after so many evolutions, it still could not evolve this sound away and how genuinely annoying it was. He asked her through the blood contract how she liked it whether, having never expected the evolution to finish so fast this round. The promised 24 hours, not even a third spent. He glanced at the heap of dim, near-ruined pills and treasures below, and understood why. Evolution time could be shortened, and all he needed was to pile natural treasures nearby and let the automatic absorption cut the duration. The mosquito had. The deeper the sleep, the greater the danger. And now, so long as he stockpiled enough resources first, the mosquito could shrink that window of vulnerability. The panel updated, and he devoured it. His race now read as Netherflame Blood Mosquito. His lifespan 20 years. His bloodline leaping to intermediate 5-star. His blood key at 521.4, both second-grade early stage. His evolution points down to 11 and 5. A new passive monarch's pressure at level 1. The soul-devouring thorn at level 5. The molten insect hive at level 5. The soul-burst flame feather at level 4. And the nether flame battle armor at level 1. The note at the bottom told him the next evolution would demand 2,000 blood chi and 350 evolution points. Another epic tier windfall. His spiritual power had jumped by over 200 points on its own. His bloodline vaulting from intermediate 1-star to intermediate 5-star, one step short of an advanced bloodline. And this evolution had unlocked 2 brand new skills, one passive and one active, while every older skill upgraded as well. He read the details starting with the biggest change, the flame upgrade, his azure, fusing his spiritual power with the source flame of the azure flame, flying lion into a higher order soul flame. Now every fire-type skill carried a fierce spiritual burn, able not only to incinerate an enemy's body, but to strike straight at their soul. Once it attached to a target, it stayed inextinguishable until his spiritual power ran dry. And since nearly all his skills traced back to that flame, this single upgrade lifted his whole offensive line to a new order. Next, the 2 new skills. Monarch's Pressure fused his spiritual power with the Lion King bloodline into a passive aura, so that any creature of lower grade and lower spiritual power would feel fear rise from its soul and find its strength suppressed. The 2 weak or feeble-willed, collapsing without a fight or dying on the spot. Majestic as a lion, spikes at the shoulders, wreath and a monarch's nether fire, greatly raising physical and fire resistance, and letting him absorb any fire attack, no more than 2 grades above him. Its soul-burning pain effect inflicted dual burning of body and soul on anything that touched it. And who would dare call a mosquito squishy now, when the mosquito was a flying tank? Then the old skills each upgraded once. His molten heart demon sting had become the soul-devouring thorn. His mouth part, now carrying the nether flame, had become the soul-burst flame feather. Its wing blades upgraded to nether flame blades that carried a mental strike on impact. Then the last skill, the one that mattered most. His blood food tracking had been wholly reworked into netherworld vision. No longer simple tracking, but a spiritual power domain of 3,000 meters, centered on him, within which nothing could hide. A mosquito radar, because before the mosquito could see nothing but creatures with blood. And now it was nearly a cultivator's divine sense. Having taken stock of it all, he felt the explosive new power inside him, and his confidence swelled. His bluff chi value had not changed, but the mosquito had learned a stack of higher-order techniques, and his combat power had soared several times over. The next evolution wanted 2,000 blood chi and 350 evolution points, and that 2,000 was the 3rd-grade early-stage threshold, which meant every future evolution would demand breaking a full grade. All the mosquito had to do was keep sucking blood. growing and evolving without limit, enough to make any powerhouse in this world die of envy. Only 12 days since he became a mosquito, and the mosquito had already risen this high. Since his skills upgraded on their own with every evolution, was it still worth spending precious evolution points to upgrade them by hand when the points were so hard to come by and always lag? Whereas point spot upgrades improved the skill stats. His swarm space, for instance, had auto-upgraded to the molten insect hive across 2 evolutions, gaining insect self-destruction and mental shock. Yet, its space and its cap of 1,000 insects had not changed at all, while spending points would double that storage every time. He saw put that way, upgrading skills separately was very much. But that put him back in a bind, because the logic was sound, and the trouble was that evolution points were genuinely not enough. Every evolution, eating a massive stack of them and merely gathering enough for one, took real effort. The system answered seriously that it was because the mosquito had not been worthy before. He gaped. This dog of a system was throwing in personal attacks now. First, the mosquito could suck the sap of spiritual herbs of 3rd grade or higher and convert their life essence into points. Though such herbs were usually guarded by 3rd grade beasts. The inkjade black turtle a special case, because the Blackstone's secret realm spiritual energy was so low its strongest beasts kept at 2nd grade mid-stage. It paused, then added that it was about the same now, and the mosquito could only grind his teeth. Second, the mosquito could earn bonus points by killing enemies at least 2 minor realms above him. Third, feedback from his blood contract partner. Since every time Hyun raised her blood chi realm, she fed a portion of pure energy back to him. He boked, asking when that setting had appeared since. She had upgraded so many times, and the mosquito had never seen a scrap of it. The system said the method needed the mutual trust and intimacy between us both to reach 60 or higher. The greater the values, the greater the feedback, so that even now, after everything, our numbers had only just barely crossed 60. He said nothing. The system replied that it had received his message and was currently drafting a suicide plan on his behalf. He felt a blood vessel about to burst in his skull, certain this damnable system was doing it on purpose. But could he be blamed for that, when the mosquito had started as a mosquito and a white-striped mosquito with only days of life left at that? A disastrous start, and it was already a miracle the mosquito had survived. He ranted wildly inside. However heartbreaking the delivery, there were 3 more ways to gather evolution points now, and life was finally starting to look up, though. Then again, he shot the empress a resentful look, since after all the times we had been through life and death together, his trust value had only just cleared 60, which was too unfair by half. Fed back into her through the blood contract. The Onatenth vitality feedback from her contract beast. Though this mosquito's vitality value had not risen, she could feel the quality of what it fed back was several times purer, as if its bloodline had climbed again. If its earlier feedback resembled a martial artist practicing yellow rank techniques, its current quality matched at least a mid-grade black rank 1. She was quietly delighted, thinking that if this mosquito kept evolving until it reached an imperial-level bloodline, the feedback might not fall short of the dragon she had contracted in her past life, and she had to admit, it had already earned the right to be her true companion. What was it feeling wronged about now? She looked at the netherflame blood mosquito circling in the air, unable to work it out since this guy had just evolved and rocketed in strength, so he ought to be overjoyed. The road ahead was wider now. Junan City, capital of Sumyong Province, a super city said to have drained the whole province dry, ranked in the Federation's top 10. Its demonic beasts and rare bloodlines. Nothing like what Gang City could offer. When the time came, the mosquito was going to suck and suck and suck. At the entrance of Gang City Yongmu High School, Wangri and Yupong climbed out of a taxi. Yupong rubbed his brow, his face full of exhaustion, and urged her to say less, that they should find the student fast, take her to Dunan, and the mission would be done. Just then, a figure walked briskly toward them in a white robe, elegant and bearing, his brow carrying a powerful authority that commanded without anger. Wang Reed glanced over and froze, and then her face broke into disbelieving joy as she recognized President Wang. She had never dreamed she would lay eyes on her idol here, the vice president of the Provincial Spiritual Mentalist Association, a 7th grade expert, Wang Zhongmong. She had admired his manner across countless conference photos, that face she could never mistake, and her heart pounded wildly. That maybe, just maybe, If President Wang took a liking to her, he might make an exception and let her into the Provincial Spiritual Mentalist Association, the Holy Land every spiritual mentalist in Sumyong Province dreamed of. Wang Yung, for his part, was mildly surprised to run into the two teachers the moment he arrived. She greeted him breathlessly, introducing herself as Wang Ri, a teacher from Dunan Number 1, and a grade 3 spiritual mentalist, saying she had admired him for so long, her voice trembling with excitement. Wang Zhang nodded faintly and asked with a note of impatience whether they were the teachers done in Number 1 had sent to run the assessment. She thought nothing of it, assuming he had inferred it from her done in Number 1 uniform, and hurried to confirm that yes, they had indeed come about a student's transfer application. Then she exhaled at length, her face composing itself into just the right measure of fatigue and grievance, and launched into a lament about how hard the trip to Gang City had been. A whole day on the high-speed rail, no private car to be had after they got off, forced to cram into a filthy taxi for a long and bumpy ride before they arrived. Who had asked her whether she was tired or not was none of his concern. Standing beside her, felt his own eyelids twitching, mortified, thinking that sister they had ridden in first class in the taxi had been perfectly clean, and was her act not laid on a bit. Wang Ri noticed neither reaction and pressed on with her self-directed performance, her tone shifting suddenly to the righteous as she declared that though the journey was hard and the conditions crude as a glorious teacher, her chest like a martyr for a great cause, proclaiming that they had traveled thousands of miles to assess the transfer applicant in person, ensuring their school's admission standards stayed absolutely fair, just, and open. His toes practically carving a 3-bedroom apartment into the front of his shoes, thinking that being a colleague to such an idiot was truly a sin. Wang Ri only warmed to her theme, feeling her performance particularly on point, and slapped her thigh, telling President Wang that speaking of this, she was full of indignation that they had come this time for a student named Hyun, whose application to transfer into Dunan Number 1 was simply absurd. She spat that this Hyun was flat out abusing the regulations, treating them like fools, dragging them all the way from Dunan City for nothing. And even with decent talent, a temperament like that would never amount to anything. While she talked, she kept sliding her eyes toward President Wang, angling for her idol's approval, certain that a big figure like Wang Zhongmyang would surely despise a student who abused the rules and lacked all self-awareness. The system's flaws in her political instincts all at once. What she got back was not praise. President Wang's face grew darker by the second, dark enough to drip water, and then a single crisp splat cracked across the quiet night and sent Wang Ri spinning through the air before she crashed to. As she sat there, stunned, covering her cheek, her mind blank, unable to grasp why her idol had struck her, President Wang looked down at Wang Ri with eyes cold enough to kill, his voice shaking with fury, and demanded whether she thought she was even worthy of gossiping about Miss Hyun behind her back. He demanded what kind of thing she thought she was, whether she had the faintest idea of Miss Hyun's status. Even if the principal of Dunan Number 1, Youngwoo High School himself came, he would have to be respectful when he met Miss Hyun, and even he, President Wang, would have to. Halfway through, he caught himself, realizing he had nearly let slip something he had no business saying, because the Federation's highest-level secrecy agreement was no joke, warning them coldly that Miss Hyun needed no transfer assessment at all, that her enrollment at Dunan Number 1 was already finalized, her coming here only a transition, a formality, and she would not even sit the joint examination, because she already had guaranteed admission to Hong University in Kyongdae. He told them to get back to Dunan this instant, and that if he ever heard them wagging their tongues about her again, they should not blame him for being impolite, then turned and walked back toward the school without another glance. The ride back was a suffocating thing, and Wang clutched her swollen face, her eyes dull, still not recovered from the shock. After a long silence, Yupong ventured that he had told her to keep a low profile away from home, instead of throwing her weight around, and that running into someone tough was just her own. And she burst out asking what exactly this Hyun was. Why President Wang would strike her that hard over some student from Gang City. Why he would say that even the principal of Dunan, no one had to treat the girl with respect, that even he himself had to. Yutong sat quiet for a moment, then pieced together President Wang's words into a guess even he found outrageous, wondering aloud whether the girl might be the illegitimate daughter of some top-tier family in the Federation, only recently found and taken back in the only explanation that fit, since nothing else could make an of President Wang's stature. So wary. A big family, an illegitimate daughter, and instantly a hot coiling jealousy wrapped itself around her heart, like a venomous snake, as she came from an ordinary working family, she thought, and had ground her way up on 10 times the effort of anyone else, draining her family dry, clawing to third grade at 30, and barely squeezing into Dunan number 1 as a plain teacher. And now some country girl lucky in the womb could vault into what she had dreamed of. Dunan, no one was the holy land of cultivation, in the eyes of every student in Sumyong province. She ground her teeth and spat that she saw it all clearly now. That in the end, the world came down to background and birth. That there was no fairness anywhere. That people like her who climbed rung by rung on their own sweat were nothing beside a silver spoon child, born at the finish line. Privately, he noted the irony that she wanted equality from those above her and rigid class from everyone below. The more Wang Reed chewed on it, the angrier she got, her eyes going red, and she muttered that background or not, a girl raised in a dump-like gang city could hardly be strong. The joint examination was 3 days out, she said, and the country girl would get her humiliation then, crushite by real geniuses into a laughing talk. And picturing it, she felt a little better. Yupong looked at her, without expression, and reminded her she must not have heard President Wang because the girl was guaranteed admission to Hyun University in Kyongdae. The whole world seemed to go silent at guaranteed admission to the 2 top institutions in the entire federation. She lost the last thread of control and let out a frantic cracking scream inside the little taxi, shrieking, "Why her? Which family was it?" That it was too unfair, too much bullying, her whole mind collapsing on the spot. He snapped that she must be a lunatic, that she had not shut up since she climbed in, and told them both to get out. He pulled over and threw them onto the curb. The next morning, a military transport aircraft stood waiting at the temporary airfield in Gang City. Its hull forged from special alloy and etched all over with intricate formation patterns fed in and overnight by the provincial government for the sole purpose of escorting Hyun. Jang Sang-yeop led the team himself, backed by 5 7th-grade martial artists, a lineup heavy enough to move a provincial governor. Inside the cabin, Hyun sat quietly by the window, and, with a thought, she loosed the azure flame-flying lion cub from her beast-taming bag so it could stretch. Born only days ago, the little thing had already grown past half a meter. That growth only held during infancy, since a Hyle bloodline beast needed 7 or 8 years, sometimes more than a decade to peak, unless a fortune in resources shortened the road. Having confirmed she could walk the path of beast taming again, she meant to start raising this cub in earnest. So she drew a slab of 2nd-grade demon beast meat from her storage bag and held it out, telling it flatly to eat. Right then, the cub caught a scent it knew and jerked its head up, spotting him dozing on her shoulder, and its eyes lit up as it trotted over, whimpering and fawning, working hard to win the attention of the mosquito it had decided was its mother. He looked down at the silly thing that the cub understood, clamped its jaws on the meat in Hyun's hand, and dug in. The mosquito could feel the empress's mood curdle behind him, the dignified beast-taming empress of 2 lifetimes, unable to command a single cub, forced to route her orders through a mosquito. A few hours later, the craft slid into Dunan City airspace, and Jang Sung-yeop and the 5 7th-grade martial artists all let out the same breath. Because entering Dunan meant absolute safety, the sky over the whole city was sealed, was doored, under an imperial-grade defensive formation, laid down personally by the Federation's top formation master, the Sky Shield. Jang Sung-yeop came over, his shoulders loosening, and told her that now they were in Dunan, she could move about freely, and he would arrange somewhere for her to stay, though he still suggested she remain at the school. The safest places outside the Federation's military bases, he said, were the top university, since behind every school stood the Ministry of Education. He added that as one of the top 10 high schools in the country, Dunan number 1 had an underground spirit-gathering formation with spiritual energy density and cultivation resources of the very first rank. The spiritual medicine, especially since the school held a deep partnership with the local pharmaceutical giant, the So Group, whose spirit herb stores were second to none in the nation. We absolutely had to go. Jang Sung-yeop went on, that he had already spoken with the school, and they had a large batch of resources set aside for her, hers to collect directly, a welcome gift arranged by the Federation in advance. For anything beyond that, the Federation still hoped she would fight with her own strength, since what they wanted to raise were peerless geniuses who could stand alone, not flowers in a greenhouse. He hesitated, then added one last warning that once she was in Dunan, it was best not to let slip too easily that she came from Gang City, because people here carried a heavy sense. She already knew, though she had spent little time in Dunan in her past life. She had heard the rumors that a landmark tower, hundreds of meters tall, stood at the city's heart. And there was a running internet joke that you must never speak a country dialect beneath it, where the thing would flip into a defense tower and blast the intruder to slag. The craft sat down cleanly at the Dunan military field, and a hover car with a special plate was already waiting. As the vehicle rolled into the city, the view outside pried his compound eyes wide open. Skyscrapers stabbing into the clouds with runes flowing over their faces. The sky ribbed with orderly hovercar lanes, and now and then, down on the ground, a great contract beast hauling a magnificent beast carriage passed at a stately pace. Compared to Gang City, it was another world. Soon, the hovercar stopped before a school gate, grand enough to swallow a small town. They gave off an invisible pressure, and the moment they stepped out, he came forward beaming, introducing himself as the dean, surnamed Joe, welcoming them with a warmth that shaded into reverence. His eyes fixed on Hyun full of curiosity and awe. He had been hauled out of bed the night before by a call from the principal, who told him in an unprecedentedly grave tone to receive a transfer from Gang City at the highest possible. Zhang Shang Yap returned the courtesy briefly and took his leave, his mission done. Dean Zhou led Hyun onto the campus, chattering warmly as they walked, explaining that as the best high school in the province, Dunan No. 1 used a streaming system for the third year, sorting students by strength into ordinary classes, elite classes, and the hidden dragon class. Ordinary students sat around first grade late stage, and the elite classes demanded at least first grade peak, with fewer than 200 students across the whole third year, his voice swelling with pride as he called it. The school's true trump card. Only 8 students. Everyone a peerless genius, already specially recruited by the 2 top universities, Huaqiang and Qiangde. Back in Gang City, first grade peak students like Zhou Chongchong and Li Weio had been the top of the whole city. Yet here it was just the entry ticket to the elite class. Dean Zhou went on with a smile that under the arrangements from above, since Miss Hyun was recommended for admission to Wyong University, she had naturally been placed in the hidden dragon class. But hearing yesterday that a new student was arriving, they had grown curious and shown up anyway, probably to welcome her. Since young people loved a bit of excitement, he suggested she head to the classroom first to meet her new classmates, while he went to the academic affairs office to fetch the resources the Federation in the school had prepared. He grumbled too. Some big shot's descendant had come parachuting down. To her, it made no difference where she went, so long as the resources were there to rebuild her strength as fast as possible. Meanwhile, in the Hidden Dragon class's private cultivation room, 8 cushions of 1,000-year cold jade sat in a luxuriously wide space. The spiritual energy so thick, it was nearly a thing you could touch. 8 young figures sat cross-legged. A handsome youth with a faintly flamboyant air spoke first, remarking that for an out-of-town transfer to drop straight into the Hidden Dragon class, at this exact moment, the newcomer must carry quite. His name was So Ran, a direct science of the So family of Dunan, the clan behind the So group, the giant that owned the alchemy and pharmaceutical trade across all of Dunan in most of the province. So Ran himself was a second-grade peak beast tamer, whose contract beast was a king-level 3-headed crimson flame lion. Her name was Choir Ran of the second-rate Cho family of Dunan. Another of the 8 wondered aloud who the transfer could be, since only 3 days remained before the joint examination, and someone was being airdropped straight into their class. So, Ran curled his lip and said there was nothing to wonder about that. Either the newcomer was a monster so heaven-defying the school made an exception, or they carried a massive background. When a ponytailed girl guessed the newcomer might be a prodigy from another city in the province, someone agreed at once, sniffing that those little people lacked even a basic city-wide spirit-gathering formation. So, even the finest talent born there was wasted, since the true watershed of a life was the womb, and some people were born at the finish line. Harsh words, but of the 8 in the room, 7 came from powerful, wealthy Dunan families, raised on resources outsiders could not imagine, and only one was the exception. Just then, A boy scrolling the campus forum on his phone cried out, saying someone had exposed the transfer student's background, and every gaze in the room snapped to him. The post claimed the transfer was named Hyun, out of a remote little place called Gang City, that her first arts strength was only first grade mid-stage, that she was a beast tamer whose contract beast was a white-striped mosquito. The whole cultivation room went dead silent. The 8 favored children traded looks. Choir Ran recovered first, frowning that an anonymous post was hardly credible, that Gang City and first grade mid-stage, and a white-striped mosquito were too absurd to be anything but trolling. Work, in under 30 seconds. A file chimed onto his screen, and his face froze, then twisted into pure absurd disbelief, as he swore that it was all true. Reading off that, the Gang City. Young Mew High School records listed Hyun at vitality rating first grade mid-stage, with the contract beasts, logged as a white-striped mosquito. Every word a match. So, Rand's eyes went wide as he blurted that she was first grade mid-stage and had contracted a white-striped mosquito, the trashiest breed of mosquito there was. Choi Ran frowned and searched Gang City on her phone, her face going strange as she read that it was a county-level town that did not even rank third tier, one of the very bottom cities of the whole province. No wonder the girl was so weak, and concluded that after all the noise, the transfer was just a pure through-and-through connected student. They had braced for a strong opponent and gotten a piece of trash. So Ran curled his lip, losing interest, wary of the background, but caring nothing for the girl herself. And the others found it equally dull, since someone who slipped in through the back door was not worth their time. Then the refined boy in gold-rimmed glasses beside Sho. Ran told Saran not to be so quick to leave, his eyes glinting as he pointed out that she herself might be trash. Several of them paused at that, because for all their weight, even the top-tier family behind Soans could not match the great families of the capital up there at the foot of the throne. But right then, a youth in the corner who had held his silence the whole time stood abruptly. He was slightly thin, plain-faced, his eyes fierce with resolve, wearing a faded old uniform that clashed with all the glossy rich children around him, his body faintly trembling, as he said in a hoarse, furious voice that this was too much, that it was unjust. The others watched him with varied looks, but no surprise, because they all knew his past, a truly hard man. A madman who had clawed up from the bottom on nothing but desperation and talent. His parents had been the most ordinary of workers, and to fund his cultivation, to get him into Dunan number 1, and pull him above his class, the family had paid in blood, dropping debt of overwork for a compensation payout. That was a drop in the bucket against cultivation costs, in the hundreds of thousands and millions. Only after Jing Jiang ground to the top of that class, on sheer will and talent, catching the school's eye and winning a larger cut of resources, had the family eased all to him. The word fairness had been bought with his father's life and his mother's dignity, and every seat and every resource in the school was sacred. So a nobody of unknown origin, a first-grade mid-stage with a trash mosquito, using so-called background to steal a place that should have gone to someone more hard-working and gifted, was not just injustice. He said he could not accept it, his eyes bloodshot as he stared at the door like an enraged lion cub, declaring he would go to the principal in the education bureau and demand an explanation. Choi Ran frowned, wanting to stop him, knowing he was throwing an egg at a stone, but she found no words to say. Just as his hand reached for the door, it slid open on its own to both sides. The ape fell silent at once, every gaze swung to her, because the newcomer was Hyun. Her expression was calm, as if she did not see the furious youth at the threshold, and did not care about the several scrutinizing, curious, disdainful, or amused stares in the room. Choi ran and so ran, and he caught the flat verdict pass through her mind that these two had barely acceptable talent, while the rest looked like trash. The 8 of them lost themselves for a beat the moment they saw her face clearly. Then their attention slid to the monster on her shoulder, and the room froze. That mosquito was the size of an adult's palm, its body sheathed in a ferocious carapace of interwoven deep blue and dark red, the very edges of its wings flickering with eerie nether fire. So Rand's mouth fell open wide enough to hold an egg as he pointed, aghast, and demanded whether that thing was a white-striped mosquito. And the others stared, in the same disbelief. This was plainly a mosquito-type demonic beast none of them had ever seen. The pupils of the class's cold, arrogant second-grade, mid-stage spiritual mentalist tightened as he read the beast's true strength first. judging its second-grade early stage, and everyone startled again. A second-grade early stage beast tamer. They traded strange looks because a contract beast at second-grade early stage at 18 was genuinely good talent, top tier in any ordinary class, and near the head of an elite class. Yet this was the hidden dragon class, whose floor was second-grade mid-stage. She was not pure trash after all, only a well-connected person with decent talent. And connected was still connected. While they stewed, Hyun paid the tangle of stairs no mind, walked straight to an empty cold jade cushion, sat, and closed her eyes, as if waiting for something. At that, Jing Jong, blunt and raw, could hold it no longer, and strode over, his voice rasping but firm, asking what level her strength truly was. Hyun opened her eyes slowly, her cold gaze fixing on him, and spat back 3 words, asking whether he was looking for trouble, that he only wanted to know whether she was qualified to sit here, whether she had earned the seat on her own strength or on her background. She looked at him calmly for 2 seconds, then closed her eyes again, as if one more word would be a waste. He complained to myself from her shoulder that the guy did not seem. Blood rushed to Jing Jong's face at being so blatantly ignored, and he decided she was guilty, that she did not dare answer. All smiles apologizing for the wait, and setting the box down before her. The freshman resources the Federation and the school had readied, asking her to check them. She opened her eyes and casually opened the box, and at once a dense medicinal fragrance and a wash of spiritual energy filled the whole room. The room hushed, expressions turning amused, because the combined value ran to at least 3 million. More than even Hidden Dragon students like them ever received at once. And now every one of them was 100% convinced. She was a connected girl with a background that reached the heavens. As for his compound eyes, they lit up like 2 little bulbs the second he saw those herbs, because it was all evolution points. In this wave was pure profit. Facing millions in resources, Hyun's face stayed still as a quiet well, as though she were looking at a heap of common weeds. Now the room was fully speechless, since without a word of explanation, she had told them through her actions that yes, she was connected. And what of it too, arrogant. A handsome youth beside San curled his lips and teased that Soren hated girls who acted cool like this. That she was overdoing it, asking whether he was going to go put her. That a girl this good-looking was simply cold and elegant. And did the boy really not get it? The boy had nothing to say to that. The handsome youth was named Hua Myung-hune of the Hua family, a top-tier beast-taming clan of Dunan. The So family led Dunan's alchemy trade, and the Hua family held half its beast-taming trade. So Ron and Hu Young-hun, best friends since childhood. So, there was nothing about the man's behavior Hun could not read. First was using his family and his face to flirt with girls everywhere. The current school beauty of Dunan #1, being just one of his countless exes. The second was frantically chasing girlfriends and breeding his contract beast. And Huang Mong-hun still remembered visiting the So family's beast-taming base and seeing that poor 3-headed crimson flame lion ringed by 7. A tragedy for the whole lion kingdom. The worst for the fact that the lion was still a cub, whose mane had not even come in. Hu Yonghan knew the habits were flaring up again. This Hyun really was too beautiful. The school beauty of Dun and #1, likely to look like a maidservant beside her. And though her talent fell short by Hidden Dragon standards, so what? Since to be airdropped into their class at this moment meant the power behind her was no small thing. No worse than the So and Hua families. The room went subtle for a while. All of them extraordinary in origin and arrogant to the bone, unable to raise any interest in befriending a backdoor girl, willing to flatter a country bumpkin who had changed her fate by being born well. Soon several of them, Cho He-ran included, filtered out, judging it better to go practice than waste time here. Only the gold-rimmed boy who had first pushed to build a relationship lingered, hunting an opening to strike up a conversation, and only Jin Jong stayed rooted, fists clenched, expression shifting. And from the dean's attitude in that box of priceless resources, he could tell her background was likely even more terrifying than he had imagined. He gave Hyun one long, deep look, then turned and left without a word. He lay on her shoulder watching it all, honestly surprised. By any normal process, a few blind idiots should have leapt out to mock his empress, snarling that connection should get out, and that she did not deserve the seat. And then the empress would unfurl her overbearing aura, slap their faces, stun the room, and finally he, the king of pretense, would step out to finish the job and dominate the whole scene. Instead, The hot-the-head, who looked most like cannon fodder, had worked it out himself and left, and the rest war could not be bothered. No, this was too abnormal, and he actually felt a little off balance about it. Fine. Better no one bothered us. He quit chewing on it and turned his eyes to that box of spirit grass. All of it. Evolution points. He rubbed his forelimbs, unable to hold back, and wondering whether to tell the empress, then deciding not to bother her while she studied that broken flower. Besides, these resources were for us, and as her contract beast, surely it was only natural he'd take the lion's share. Perfect excuse. With a flutter, he flew over the box, aimed at one of the plainest-looking little red flowers, and drove his hideous proboscis deep into it. She paused a half-second before pulling her eyes back. She was used to it since a guy who could drain a spirit-nurturing crystal could obviously drink herb juice, and there were plenty here.